50 minutes presentation. That's what I'm targeting for today, and happy to ask questions. And I'll also start to deal with that in the questions and answers. So there's quite a bit to get through. All right, so the business data sophistication journey. This is what we'll be taking you through today. And really, the way I measure the business data sophistication is this measurement or continuum over here. It's been presented by quite a few people. I've added on knowledge driven, and I'll share with you a little bit later on in terms of that situation. So the question that I'd like to ask you guys today is, and I believe you can see the question at the moment, is where are you on this journey? So here's some definitions that I have in terms of just some examples of being data disabled. Some people call it resistant to data, data resistant. Other people really just discard data when it comes to decision making. And the simple example here is the report says the road is congested. I don't believe it. Let me try. And then we go into data enabled, where people are starting to see business, see value in the data, and they understand as is, and now they're starting to respond to it. So, for example, the report said the road is congested, we should leave a little bit earlier. Data-led is predictions are reliable, there's lots of trust in the predictions, and people believe what the data is saying to them. And what the analytics are saying to them. So it's not just data, it's also the analytical side of it as well. Okay, and then we have data-driven, where decisions are dependent on data. It's not always that decisions are made from data, made by data and machine learning. That's what we refer to as digital decisioning, in terms of you've got automated systems that are understanding what the requests are and making the data. And then we have knowledge driven, where certain decisions and actions are delegated to data and knowledge is filtering the data. Okay, and there's the example. So the report says we have a customer that needs our help and they're en route. So all of a sudden it's not just about where we're going, it's also, oh shucks, there's somebody else there that can do with your insight. Okay, so if you wouldn't mind answering those questions. Where do you guys find yourself on this journey? Are you disabled? Are you enabled? Are you being led by data? Are you driven? Are you knowledge driven? Paul, where are you? Other than on Menti.
Well, firstly, my Menti thing isn't updating. Should we refresh the page or what? Oh,
yeah.
We have to specifically refresh. Okay. I think in my department, I guess, working for Altron's a big place, so it's difficult to answer in total.
Okay.
But I mean, we are not far up to the right hand side there. I can say that we can improve a whole lot.
Okay. I think what is important here is the fact that is your data helping you answer some of the questions? So, how far is your data helping you with the predictions, with the actions, and stuff like that? So, it's getting an understanding of what sort of support are you getting your data to answer the business questions. All right. I'm not seeing any votes. Have any votes on your side, Paul?
I voted, but I'm not the administrator, so I can't see.
Yeah, I got it on the screen. So that's strange. I'm not sure why I'm not getting a.
Yeah, I also voted and didn't see an answer there.
It's probably Drew's fault. I mean,
there we go.
Yeah. See, Paul, I fixed it.
Okay.
Moi.
So most people are sitting in data enabled, and typically, if I go back to the screen over here, what we are seeing that data enabled is where the BI, the business intelligence lives, and you can basically perform descriptive analytics, and you can answer the question, what happened? You may not always be able to answer why it happened. And then those people that are talking about data-led, they are able to answer using data. They answer what will happen in the future, whatever period of time that may be. Okay, so that's pretty good. I suppose whilst you're saying data-enabled,
quick interruption. Oh, don't worry, it's done.
Okay, are you allowing people to come in?
No, Willem lost the code, but he's got it from Paul.
Okay, all right. Okay, great. So data disabled, you may be sitting somewhere between data enabled and data disabled. Are your executives making use of the data? Are they resistant to some of the data? Where are they in that process? Okay, so guys, thanks for that. Really appreciate that feedback. And so that's the end of the mentee session. Really nice and quick, so Drew didn't complain. Okay, so this is what we refer to as the data-driven knowledge. Okay, the business transformation that was on the screen that I went through with you. So the goal of this webinar, what I'm trying to achieve here is to give you the step-by-step process that you can follow to achieve the goal of making data accountable for decision making. Okay, so how do we get to a point where people trust the data enough to allow it to make data? And of course, it's certain decisions. It's not going to be all decisions, and I'll certainly share with you at some stage in terms of different types of decisions in different areas. Okay, so the chances are that the current state that we are sitting on, that our business has lost trust in your data. It's not comfortable in being able to go to data-driven. Lots of people talk about it. I've been in many presentations where people refer to data-driven, and I think it certainly may be in an area of the business, but is it at the executive level? I'm not sure about that. I'm not convinced. I don't know if any of you guys have that sort of had that area where your company is data driven. We didn't see any answers, but that's where we want to go, right? To be able to have so much data and the appropriate analytical skills to help make those decisions. Okay, so we want to reestablish confidence in the data's knowledge of the business and will be used to answer business questions. That's if I think of data management, if I think of analytics, it's really getting that confidence back in the people that we can answer their questions, or we can help them support the answering the questions and making decisions. All right, so the sophistication journey, the agenda that I have today is just go through a step-by-step plan on how we achieve the knowledge-driven sophistication. We want to be able to talk you through that in achieving knowledge-driven data. We'll look at how you can reduce inappropriate analytical approach to answering questions, and then discover how you can easily transform from your current state to your target state. Okay. All right, so we've done that. So just wanted to talk to you about the why did I go about trying to prepare this journey, trying to talk to the execs in terms of helping us out on this decision sophistication journey. So the problem as I see it is that a lot of the times we are expecting data scientists, we're expecting analytics to solve business problems without clear and concise direction from the business with respect to certain things like the value discipline and the operating model. Also the North Star and the one metric that matters. So just as a interesting thing, if you guys wouldn't mind on the chat, how many of you guys have got things well defined like the one metric that matters? and the North Star in terms of what's critical to your business at this point in time. And if you don't have these type of things, then I find analytics to be quite difficult in showing value. Yes, it can certainly expose things that we didn't know, and we can do exploratory analytics, but constantly giving the value back to the business, you need to have that clear understanding from the business as to what the metrics are to measure the business. So what is the solution? What are we saying to executives and CDOs and people that are involved in establishing this? Is we need to get the appropriate context and frame so that data analytics can provide decision support. We really need to get to this point where we're supporting decision both from a data point of view and from an analytical point of view. Analytics must, what I like to refer to analytics is that it becomes the technique and process of measuring the movement towards the business targets. So what are we doing analytics for? What are we trying to achieve from analytics? I've been in numerous meetings where we sit down, we get data, and we say, okay, now what do we want to do with it? And I've typically got 4 or 5 different people with different perspectives saying, I think we should be doing this. I think we should be doing exploratory analytics. Other people saying, I think we should be doing confirmatory analytics. Other people saying, I think we should be doing RPA or robotic process automation. And we've all got different approaches and different directions that we want and things that we want to achieve out of it. And we have to solidify that and make it concrete. All right, so what do we get out of it?
You there, Howard, from my side. Yes. I know you speak a lot about data literacy. In fact, is it not necessary to define and clarify what even those terms that you've just used actually mean? Some people might be using the same term incorrectly.
Certainly, Drew. I mean, this is, I suppose, one of the things that I haven't mentioned here is that the ability to interpret the data and present the data requires the ability to read data, write data, and argue with data, and then have a common understanding that we talk in the same language.
Yeah, it's a conversation Mashima and I have had a few times, and I'm sure you could chip in and validate that.
Yeah. So really important, and I'll take you through some of it. But what I like to do with the execs, and what I'm seeing very valuable, is to work them through in terms of saying, how do you get involved in analytics as an executive? How do you place some control on it? And I believe it's through this type of scenario where they are clearly saying to us, what is their North Star and what is the metric that is important to them? And again, this is through coaching and education. And I'm always amazed as to how many people don't have those metrics defined and agreed on. And so we tend to chase after all sorts of stuff that may make sense to the business. All right, so interesting enough, from Gartner Research, I found a fantastic paper. They're talking about digital transformation, and right at the top, when they get to the board members, they're saying today we are in a situation where we're constantly hearing from our execs that we don't understand the data, we don't understand what it's saying to us. It's constantly changing, and we need to be able to get to a point where where the execs are telling us it's much easier to hit our goals. I can see the trends coming and make decisions based on fact. Okay, which is pretty strange, right? You know, one wouldn't expect at this day and age that we're battling to hit the targets, understand from the data where we're going, and the trends to make the decisions based on fact. And that blew me away in terms of, this is the latest paper coming out of Gartner saying, you know, the ability to see the trends and make decisions based on facts. All right. So what we are finding, and what I am finding, is there are some approaches where we expect analytics to discover the answers to all our questions. so many times the team, the data science and the analytics are not given the right frame and context to provide the right answers. And we're saying we've got to fix that and we've got to change the way we do that. So I'm referring to it more as about how do we make our decision making more sophisticated, and how do we get data to support that decision making. Let's not worry too much about quality and all these other things that we talk about, metadata. I fully agree and we need it, but it is about having the conversation with business to be able to support them in the decision making. Okay, so what is the problem? This is the research from Gartner. There were a whole lot of statistics around that, and they're basically saying analytics is not answering the questions needed by executives. Now, please, if you've seen in my decision journey or my data journey, I include BI in there. All right, this is not just advanced analytics. This is the whole spectrum of analytics, all the way from canned reports through to the really most powerful set of analytics that we require. And this is the common questions and frustrations that our execs are facing is, how am I supposed to make decisions if I'm constantly surprised? Decisions are made by gut, all right? So now if we look at that, now sometimes we say that we are data enabled, but Gartner is saying we're still in the data disabled. We're still making decisions by gut. And you may be data enabled in some areas, but by and large, when it comes to the metrics that the execs want, they don't have all the execs. They don't have all the enablement that we're talking about. Okay, so how can we plan? We don't know what is coming and when. Criticisms from the executives to analytics. We're not answering their questions. Okay, so this is sort of my understanding of what has caused the problem, okay? And I'm seeing there's a whole lot of different issues. There's not just one area, but the issues that we're facing is insufficient involvement and direction from the business, sometimes lack of business architecture to provide details. I know in one or two of the customers that I'm working with at the moment, they don't have business architecture, and they don't believe in it, and they're having to do a proof of value to justify it. So now we try to bring in all of this scenario of, well, what questions, what are your metrics and stuff like that? What is your value chain? We're not seeing that. The other area that I see is a lack of decision inventory. So do you guys have a list of all your decisions and know what questions you need to answer? So when you get into the boardroom, have you done the appropriate analytics to answer those questions? Also, a more generic type of scenario is decision quality. So a lot of the times we're stopping at data quality, but we're not moving towards decision quality. And decision quality is a lot more intense because in some cases, we have to choose the appropriate teams to make a decision. We have to choose the appropriate technology. We have to approve the appropriate approach. So in some scenarios, depending on the state of your information, if you're dealing with unknown unknowns, you need to start probing. Okay, if you have got some understanding of the data and the questions, then you can work with a level of confirming your understanding with analytics. But I don't see us paying enough attention to partitioning and placing the decisions in the right areas. And I've got something which we use as Kinefin to place these decisions and build the inventory of decisions. We've got different perspectives and expectations. I shared with you just now the one example of a massive integration and data set collection from the outside. It was talking about billions of rows of data. They were very chuffed to get the data, and it's now, okay, what do we do with it? And the decisions and the expectations were completely different. I even remember one of the business SMEs saying, if that's what you want from this data, then keep me out of it. Go and do the analysis and show me when you're finished, and we'll decide whether it's right or wrong. inappropriate of application of analytics to support the business decisions, and then also promises of digital transformation without paying attention to the business decisions and their uncertainties. Don't know how many of you guys have now got actively involved with this new digital transformation processes, and I keep asking the question: is where are the set of decisions and the data that we require to support it? Where is it addressed? We're all talking about applying a whole lot of analytics and stuff like that, but the process is not controlled enough. Okay. So what is possible? And I asked myself the question from the business is, what do we need to do? How do we need to get this thing sorted out? And the very first thing that we start with business is for them to describe a shared value. So what is their shared value? Are they focusing on reducing their cost in terms of operational excellence? Is that where their focus is? Is their focus on customer intimacy, or is their focus on product leadership? So where are they? What is their focus? And is the operating model there to support the value discipline? Now, what we will find, and what a lot of times I do find, is that there's almost confusion as to, I think a lot of people are saying we're doing all of it. Now, when you pay attention to this value discipline, you start to realize that the culture that comes out of the value discipline, one will compromise the other. Okay? And certainly the suggestions from the business management is that you choose one and you go after that. That is not to say that you're a slouch in the other ones. It's just to say there's one that will drive you, and you've got to be correct, and you've got to all understand which one that is. Okay, so a typical example of that is if you're looking at operational excellence, you're looking at higher inventory turns, you're looking at low costs. Yes, you do pay attention to customers, but you know what? If the customer doesn't get the value from your low cost, well, that's not important to you. Yours is about producing the right product at the right cost. Okay, so we have to focus on then measuring. Once we've got these two down, we then focus on measuring the movement towards the business target. And I really like that view of when we sit and explain to execs what analytics is all about. It is there to support us in our understanding of how the business is moving towards the business target. Now, it may be a negative movement and it may be moving away from the target, but we need to know that. And then we can answer the right questions and apply the appropriate decision-making approach. And of course, once we've made the decision, we have to monitor the results of the action that we've just performed. Okay, so this is what I sort of try to explain to the execs is, yes, they have to have this shared value in terms of why do you exist and who are you. Those are extremely high-level questions, but they do set the framework and they set the context. Because from that, where do you and who you are and where you exist, you have to describe how do you operate. So what is my operating model? And what are the decisions on the operating model? And then how do you measure success? Once you've got all this stuff down, now we can get onto the road and start walking the path. And we can question the movement, and we can decide and act and observe. And we go through these circles. Of course, at some stage, we're going to go back and redefine how we measure success. But for a period and for a presentation of time, we should be able to operate in just understanding the movements. Okay, so this is the journey that we put forward in terms of understanding your identity, understanding the value discipline, what's the business operating model in terms of people, process, and technology, what are the metrics that are important to you, then understanding the business questions that the analytics needs to answer. Okay, and think about this, guys. If we can't get past the what happened, how do the business people say, well, what's going to happen, or why did it happen? What will happen? And what should I do to optimize it? And then the next level is, what don't I know? So we're leaving them very short of the answers to the questions that they need to have to run the business. Okay, so here's basically an overview of the sophistication journey. You can see this just the one step above. These are the top levels, and then this is the detail, all right? So when I talk about an operating model, we've got to have our capabilities, our processes, the management systems, policies, and that, and the culture sorted out. When we talk about the metrics, these are the different metrics and the layered metrics. So these are the levels. So for this talk,
for the Dolphies amongst us, what is OMTM?
The one metric that matters. Sorry, Drew.
Thank you.
The one metric that matters. So at each level, what is the one metric that matters at this point in time? Okay, and I'll give you an example of it. I'll show you an example of that when we get a little bit further down. So what I want to address in this webinar is, what business questions can your data provide trusted answers for? So of these questions, what can you provide trusted answers? Okay, now based on that quick Menti quiz that we did, most of you are sitting here on the first question. All right, some of them are saying data-led and what will happen. So we're sort of sitting here now. What we're not doing is enabling the business and the execs to say, what should I do? And that's coming into gut feeling. And then, of course, what don't I know? So you can, lots of times you can get involved, specifically in the pandemic and other types of scenarios, is you're not sure what you don't know. There's so many things are changing, and it would be helpful to get some data and some insights in terms of what you don't know at this point in time.
A question, Howard?
Yeah.
The difference between what will happen and what should I do, would you classify that as predictive analytics and then prescriptive analytics?
Yes, 100% true. So the what will happen and the why it happened is sort of this area that predictive analytics is looking at. And then what should I do is prescriptive. Okay. All right. So what I'm finding, when we work with execs and we look at and we listen to the people, is that they're wanting everybody to progress along this, especially from their data. Have they got the shared values? Have we got data to answer those questions? Do they believe in the integrity of the data? And then when the data starts to answer some of those questions, is it showing the appropriate concern? And when does it get to an accountable level where we can delegate that to digital decisioning, i.e., the business, the machine will understand the questions and make the answers and provide the decisions for the business. And there's lots of protection and sort of things that we use to help you decide which decisions are appropriate for digital decisioning. Be careful of just trying to take every decision and make or expect AI to give you the answer. Now, what does happen is that we start to get people and individuals within the organization that are operating in this way, where they fear the conflict, the trust is gone, there's a lack of commitment from them, they avoid accountability, and then they don't pay attention to the results. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get analytics to measure the movement towards the goal, and they're not paying attention. They've lost it, and they're in distrust. Now, I've also added something for the data privacy people in terms of saying the same scenario sits with external stakeholders. The more you improve the trust, the more data they give you. Okay? So there's a baseline. If you don't make it past that baseline, you're not going to get the data that you require. You'll get Donald Duck as an answer when you register as your user ID. And then you've got to go to a scenario where they trust you with their personal data, they trust you with their sensitive data, and then a willingness to commit. And you have to keep on measuring the stakeholder trust level. So I find this quite helpful to continually measure where we are within this process. So this is the decision-making, the high-level sophistication journey that we've got in terms of these different levels. We're not addressing that now. I just wanted to bring that perspective in terms of what we're trying to achieve with the business decision-making and our data. Do they trust it? Is it accountable? Are they willing to submit their decisions to that and go into that data-driven / knowledge-driven decision-making? All right. So here's an overview of the sophistication journey that we're talking about. We talk a lot about the decision governance. We talk about decision risk management. You can't ignore that. We talk about decision quality management. And then we've got a decision life cycle. So how do we plan for decisions? How do we observe what's going on in the market? And how do we decide and act? So today we're focusing on this area over here in terms of questioning. What questioning can we do with our data and what can we answer on our data? This is the guidelines that business architecture should be providing us, that North Star, the capabilities, the business performance indicators, and how can we support them in that. So here's a simple diagram of the analytics. They refer to it as the lean analytics cycle, and it's all about the one metric that matters. Identify a key business problem, pick the one metric that matters, draw a line in the sand as to where you are now, and start to measure towards that. And I'm hoping that you guys can see this, where I've described an area, for example, in my business that I'm working with and defining the metrics that matter. What's important to me is customer lifetime value. These are the calculations. And what I wanted to show you is just this scenario of basically every month, we're going to ask the following questions, and every period. So why, what, and these are the questions over here. What happened? Okay, so BI should be able to tell me I've had no movement in my customer lifetime value, I've had a positive movement, or I've had a negative movement. And then we go to the next question is, why has this happened? Okay, why was there no movement for this period? And then we go to the next one, what will happen? So what will the next 3 periods look like if we continue with no movement? And then the question, what we should be doing is to say, what should I do to make it happen? Okay, so what should I do to change it from no movement to positive movement? All right, so almost by the time you get to the board meeting, okay, these questions should be answered. Your data should have answered these first 3 questions. We're not really getting into decision making, what has happened, why it has happened, and what will happen. All right, we certainly get into decision making here, and now we need a different approach. We need more people, whatever it is, to be able to answer those questions. All right, so I should be able to have available that as an executive or as an analytics area that I've got these first 3 questions answered for the execs. And now we're looking at optimization in this last one. So we're coming up with possible approaches. And of course, what I am suggesting here is that across the operating model, you've got the one metric that matters. So in my scenario, for customer lifecycle management, I've chosen customer lifetime value. That's for me as a training organization. How do we keep people coming back for more and more training? That's what's important to us. Okay. Are there any questions in terms of that, of choosing that index or that weighting? So here you can basically see just in my Excel, the way I've set it up, I've chosen customer intimacy. this is my operating model, and you can see it from the processes or capabilities focused on relationships. These are my processes. These are the structures that I have to have, and then this is the culture that I require. So here's an example of that one metric that matters. Okay.
Yeah, Howard, I have to say I like it because by having the one metric that matters, you get away from what I call cosmetic metrics. Like I made so many calls, but they actually don't add value.
Yeah, and that's where the executive should take control, right? I mean, that's where they've got to take control of a lot of this, and then to be able to say to the analytics, okay, this is my North Star, this is the one metric that matters, this is my understanding of the calculations from a business point of view, that lifetime value is equal to the average order value multiplied by the frequency, the frequency, which is orders divided by customers, and then my churn rate. That's my calculation. I'm not saying that has to be for everybody, but they are the ones that should be able to dictate these metrics. And please note that I'm not saying the other metrics are useless or are not required. It's just saying that this is the core metric that I want to measure the movement towards and away from. And I've really got three approaches. Either I've got no movement, I've got positive movement, and I've got negative movement. Now, if my approach is positive, I can then start asking the questions: is can I get there faster, or can I and what can I do to optimize it in terms of costs? If it's negative, sure. Now, really, what's going on is basically I'm losing customers faster than I'm gaining them, and that's not a great place to be in when it takes quite some time to get customers. Okay, so let's start looking at the journey. One of the things that I spend quite a bit of time with when we build a data strategy is choosing where to start. And one of the things that I like to do is when you've got the one metric that matters, now it's about going and progressing from data to information to knowledge to wisdom. Okay? And you're basically doing that by your ability to ask and answer these questions. Okay? Just allowing certain people in. So can we ask and can the business ask and can we answer? Simple question, guys. Are you able to do that? Now, one of the important things that we do in terms of this progress is that what will happen gives the business foresight in terms of what's going on. This is the best outcome that we're referring to, and this is corporate memory learning that we're dealing with. And then these are what I've shared with you here is what I refer to as analytical techniques that can use to answer that. So the predictive modeling, as Drew was saying, it's in the what will happen. The interesting thing here is the why did it happen, and that's almost what we refer to as the voice of the customer. Why did it happen? Textual analytics in terms of listening to calls, listening to people in your call center, and it's not just about how quickly did we answer the query from the customer, but it is what did they say about us. So what is the sentiment and what is the textual analytics that we're getting from our call center to listen to the customer? And this is basically the analytics that we are talking about. As Drew was asking the question, we descriptive, what happened, why did it happen is diagnostic analytics. Predictive is what will happen. Prescriptive, what should I do? And then cognitive analytics is what don't I know? And I had some really amazing experience with one customer that basically his direction to the analytical vendor was to say, I'm not going to give you a use case. You tell me what I don't understand about the market. So when I have movement in the market, tell me what happened. Quite a challenging request. It didn't go much further than that in that scenario because they were looking for use cases and they were looking for all those descriptions. So this is a really challenging area. But what I am finding is that if you don't have the data from the previous level, it's very difficult to go to supporting the analytics in the next level. Okay, so if you're trying to do cognitive analytics and you don't understand this, what should I do? It's a bit hard because you don't know what you know. So how do I tell you what you don't know? I'm finding that really challenging at this point in time. All right, now, guys, analytics is not just about the data telling you what's going on. It's also about this ability to observe, orientate, decide, and then do some acting. Now, there's double loops and there's all sorts of stuff there that we can get into a different discussion, but what's important is going through this process. All right, so here's just a description of the different analytical categories. You can see there in terms of being able to ask these different questions. I think this is phenomenal just in terms of, let's just focus on the questions that the executives need. All right, and can I answer this in terms of their one metric that matters? Okay, so here after the first three questions, right, what will happen, or what happened, when will it happen, why does it happen? We can do those predictions. We can then get to our decisions. How do we benefit from these predictions? And start making the decisions, and then what the effects. How will these decisions impact everything else? Okay, answer the first three questions, get the predictions out, and then start going into the more complex one in your scenario. And then what I also like about these the different groups of analytics is that here you've got information. Here you start looking at your insights. And notice I said from data to information to knowledge to wisdom, it's now starting to help you make decisions in a much more better and more effective way. Okay, so just a quick recap. What have we covered? The problems and challenges that are facing our execs in terms of that, the business data decision-making journey, plan, observe, orientate, decide, and act, getting the right frame from business to answer the questions, and then focusing on your sophistication journey. Okay, that's the process that we're talking about. And then this is just something else that we can talk about at a different level, where we look at applying an uncertainty framework to get support on our analysis. How do we make a decision framework? And then how do we make an action framework that supports us? This wasn't part of this thing, but that's something we can show you later on. Okay. I think I made it just to 10 minutes to. Are there any questions and answers? Or questions, and then hopefully we can provide some answers.
So if anybody's got any questions, I think by all means, unmute yourself and ask. Let's go. Willem, you must ask something. Mashima, you got to know something.
Johan. Johan's got his hand up.
Yes, me again, Howard.
I would be disappointed if you didn't.
Okay, all right, good. Just looking at this, and now look, I guess I have to make a disclaimer. I guess I used to work for Sybase and SAP, but I've got no vested interest in selling anything from SAP. But actually, everything you went through now, actually from a very high, well, I guess a high level, anything like that, actually gets covered in SAP Analytics Cloud. Actually, I'll send I'll put the link in the chat for people just to go and have a look at it. But basically, everything gets covered there, in a sense that you can actually get high-level executives to actually go and do some planning or some predictive analytics themselves. The only caveat would be actually obviously that you need to trust your data. Okay, well that's another sort of a thing, but obviously if your BI can at least give you some relatively good governance actually for your executives, actually I think even your executives would be very nice, and it would be very nice for them to just go and play around, do some planning, do some predictive analytics themselves, and ask these questions and look at what the outcomes could be, and with machine learning even, what you don't need to be a a statistical person even to do that. So that I think is actually kind of covers everything you did. Now, actually, don't ask me what the price would be for SAP Analytics Cloud. I'm most probably you're going to have to sell your house or something like that.
Yeah. So I mean, I agree with you, Johan. Nothing that I've presented doesn't exist. What I am saying is that you got to get the business buy-in to start off with providing you with a context and frame, so you can throw tools, you can throw technology, but if you don't have the right framing and the one metric that matters and that decision-making approach, you're not gonna win.
True. And you see, the only reason why I just mentioned this is that actually you need to kind of wow your executives, to be able to do things themselves even, and then to really get them kind of like a vested interest in this. And that obviously will also motivate spending more money.
The thing that I'm seeing working a lot better is that when you understand that those metrics and the drivers, and you start answering those questions and they start believing the answering of those questions, then they get vested into it. But you've almost got to demonstrate that you can answer and you can be trusted in your approach.
True.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Johan, I appreciate that. There was some question to say, what was this cognitive analytics? I think there was a question there saying inquisitive analytics. In terms of what don't I know, and there's this idea of deep learning and taxonomies and ontologies. And this is sort of getting into the knowledge graph. Is the question about the prescriptive or the cognitive analytics? I just want to confirm. Okay. So the cognitive analytics, what we are finding is that when we build a graph, just a property graph, it allows, there's lots of things happening, correlations and things that are happening. But when we start to add on ontologies and taxonomies, and specifically an ontology that describes the truth as we know it, it allows us to filter the graph and to provide information that we are looking for. Now, one of the things that it does do is that there are times where the ontology is limited and we're finding relationship between business entities that we never knew about. Okay, and always when you look at data that doesn't fit the ontology, you've got two questions. Is this a fraudulent transaction or an incorrect transaction, or someone telling a lie, or is it something that we don't know? And it's that what we don't know that's really important and helpful. And you can answer that question in what don't I know when it doesn't fit your map of what's going on. There's another question, MD.
I see Mashima's got his hand up as well, Howard.
Mashima, yeah.
Thanks, Drew and Howard. Howard, just a quick one. Two questions from me. Is it possible for an organization to have a mixture of all these points that you've mentioned here? Yes. Within the same organization, you would have maybe data-led or data-driven, and what would be the drivers?
You certainly have that. I've been into Eskom as an example, and when they get into the fault detection, they are really far advanced in that area, and they claim to be data-driven. I haven't seen them get to knowledge-driven, but then when I go around and I look at some of the exec stuff and things like that, then I get to the feeling that they're sitting at data-disabled. So whilst they're answering certain questions about metrics lower down, they are really powerful in terms of being data-driven, but in general, they tend to be, and certainly the one metric that matters, if I was to ask you, what is the one metric that matters from an Eskom point of view, Yeah, fault detection is important, but is it the one metric that matters, or the thing, the North Star? Not convinced. That was your one question, Masima. Does it answer your one question?
Yes, it does. And the other question was, I'm just thinking that there's a lot of obsession on having the single source of truth. And how does that impact the journey here? Does it delay, or how does it help?
Yeah, it's a good question. So sometimes we fight with this whole thing of getting a whole lot of data management in place. Now, being the DAMA president, of course, data management is critical to me, but what I am trying to suggest is take the one metric that matters, and in that value chain, go and progress to getting your advanced or your capabilities up to the right level. And don't try to deal with everything. Then when you get the right level of wisdom, then go to the next value chain, the one aligned to it, and then start to answer it. So don't try to find and deal with everything all the time and try to break the whole lot, but almost start off with a specific metric and then expand along the value chain as you grow. And then you institute all the master data and all the other stuff and the metadata and the ontology to support you in that. So you're growing everything all the time.
Howard, if I can add to that, it can be that within a single organization, what one division sees as the single version of the truth may actually be to the detriment of somebody else.
Sure.
For instance, somebody's trying to drive customer upsell, but the other guys are looking for fraud.
So if you have now, and this is where I like that one metric that matters, if this is the guys, if this is critical to answer the board, then I need to do whatever it takes to give me trustworthy data to answer that question or those questions for that value chain or that one metric that matters. Jan?
Howard, so who must drive actually defining that one metrics within the organization? Whose responsibilities is it supposed to be?
So the real responsibility sits with business architecture. Now, whether it be business architecture, data architecture, what you also have is SMO, which is your strategy office. All right. They also very, very focused on getting those set of metrics that lead the business. And basically they're saying is if you constantly measure your movement towards that, of course, not ignoring everything else, but if you measure your movement towards that, you're starting to take ground and starting to show business value with the data that you're working on. Does that answer your question?
Hi, Howard. It's Dineo.
Hi, Dineo. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I want to add on to that for Mishumo, and because we're from the same company, MTN. And I think for lack of a business architecture function, I think data architecture would actually define that for them.
Yes.
That's where it will come from, yeah, because that's what we are trying to do. But because we from an OPCO, I'm representing MTN SA and not the whole group. So I'm doing that just for that one operational,
Yeah,
OPCO.
but
So
what's always important is then, okay, you sort of data architecture and governance, you're building your data strategy, you got to align it to the business. You go there and you say, well, where's my business value chain and my business architecture, and you don't find it, and you got to put some placeholders or stakeholders in place to get that one metric that matters.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, from an MTN perspective, I have to say here, we don't really have a business architecture function. So as data architects, we're taking on that function, and that's where all the value is coming out from.
That's great. And that's what you have to do. And I mean, I think in one of my other talks, I was really appealing to the data people that they got to start to learn business architecture. And I think Paul celebrated after that.
Yay, thank you.
Johan?
Yes, okay. You know what, I think you've mostly answered this, but my question really was, or it would have been, is this one metric or this really important for division or executives that need to actually design it. Actually, where would they sit? Actually, would that be a specific department, like an executive group, which does all these actually one metrics?
Yeah, so you will find, for example, and it depends on the size of the organization. So I'm really I've seen several. So I've seen in one of my customers it's SMO, Strategic Management Office. In another customer, it's business architecture. They define it in terms of the balanced scorecard. And in other cases, it's really the CEO or the CDO. So when the CDO comes in, that first 90 days, 100 days, he's got to start to understand he's mapping an alignment with the executive's view of what's important in the business. And so just establishing that connection and so having someone on the board that's starting to listen to that and see the problems, that's the person that can start to put those important metrics down for you. Now, always what I find the problem is if you try to do analytics without that, yeah, you can get some insights, but does the exec and does the organization change?
Okay. So does that then, so actually really what it boils down to for us as data management and actually professionals is when you get into a company is to immediately, as the most important thing, is decide who's actually in charge of this one metric that matters and actually push them or the company to get, make a decision on actually who needs to do this, because that's the most important thing we need to do for BI as a whole. Is that true?
Yeah, correct. Or either that or you start to show the business and demonstrate to them, take a metric, an important metric in one of the capabilities that you have, and then say how important it is to you and how would you measure this thing, and then start to just take one metric at a time and demonstrate the value. Bring in the right data, bring in the right approach or the data management capabilities and get that working.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Paul, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this one metric that matters idea, and it's just a matter of focus, and especially where I work, I'm sure I'm not isolated. There's so many things on the go that you have a problem just picking the right thing and running with it. So I was wondering, the one metric that matters as a topic is that something you can maybe also deal with in a future webinar?
Yes, certainly.
Actually unpack this.
Yeah, so I've got. I'll just quickly show you something. In terms of some of the other slides that we take people through, is designing that metric. So here it is here. But certainly something. So here's, for example, a customer life cycle. I've started using this or starting to look at this within the infrastructure that I'm implementing from a training point of view, understanding where the different metrics are, and then understanding this cake layer of metrics, right? So you may start off at a project level, and prove that focus is important, and then going departmental, and I'm doing that with the data strategy, is for the department, let's look at the SFAs and let's look at what is your core responsibility and what is your one metric that matters. And then slowly but surely, as you achieve success, you can go higher and higher up. But that's something we can take you through and take you through that approach.
Yeah, that'll be great. And then just zooming out again, the whole process that you have here. I was wondering, so with something like this, there's going to have to be some investment in terms of time and maybe technology and capability as well. So it's always a thing of finding the right level, right, of the problem that you want to solve. But I suppose that if you let's take, you mentioned Eskom. And in some areas they are quite mature, and in other areas they aren't. And I'm sure it's the same elsewhere as well. But if you want to really drive this whole idea of being just more data focused in your decision making, because of the cost involved and the people that you have to pull together to make it work, where's the best place to start? Is it something that should be just strategic on a higher level, or will it also work if you go from a business unit or department level first? Or, I mean, it's an unfair question, I'm sure, but what's your thoughts on that?
No. I think it's important, and a lot of the times it depends on your relationship with the execs. All right. Now, what we do find, and I think all of us know and all of us agree, that if we can get it coming down from the top, all right, that's the best place to operate. And if the execs are in pain in terms of certain things that are causing them immense pain, then of course that's the biggest business value that you can give. Now, sometimes they're not willing to have those discussions with you, and you may need to start off at a departmental level. And one of the areas that I saw someone doing really well was at the agile level, and really just focused on agile project management and demonstrated how collecting the right data and understanding the one metric that matters, they were able to demonstrate the value of focusing on that area and focusing on the data to answer their questions.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very, very specific, and it depends on your culture and relationships and so on.
Yeah.
I was bringing in the cost factor, because to implement something like this, it's going to require focus. It's going to require people's time and energy, and potentially also technology. So it can't be too small, otherwise you won't get anywhere. But at the same time, I'm thinking sort of in my own situation, the whole eating your own dog food idea is probably best, because if you go back to any other part of the business with something that you actually worked through in your own context, that is, it gives you a lot more credibility when you speak to people like that.
Yeah.
It's trying to.
It is, and it is about being given the opportunity to almost start off with the strategy, and not to go do everything, but to take an aspect that they're keen on and they're desperate to deliver, understand that driver, and then understand how you can support that and get behind that. So if you look at the challenge that most CDOs face, they've got 100 days to show some value, and they've got to be very strategic in about the one that they do to demonstrate the value.
Yeah.
Mishima?
That's sorry, my last question. Mishima,
Okay.
sorry, just to add on what Howard said there. So, Howard, you mentioned this a couple of times, this 100-day thing with CDOs. But I'm wondering, in the strategy work that we often get involved in, it's often said that it's taking too long before it gets the value, and it's paper based and whatnot. So that the 100-day concept, is that applicable to also when you have to develop strategies? It's not only a CDO thing.
Yeah. This one, and I think it's critical that as people that are supporting the CDO, people that are CDOs, is to say, how do I build when I come in and I have to start the process by listening and understanding what the key challenges are, where we're at. Almost, if you have a maturity assessment, you're picking it up, and then choosing the right thing to tackle to demonstrate the value of your approach. That may be master data, that may be whatever it is, that may be analytics, and typically they operate in parallel, where you've got to build the right level of insight. You've got to choose properly so you can get that value through and get a breakthrough so that people can see that there's value to doing it properly.
Yeah.
And we have to be very clear on that. Mishima?
Thanks, Howard. I was just wondering, where does the one change that matters fit in? Or is it a question we should be also asking?
Sorry, the one?
The one change that matters.
I like that. So you almost say from a CDO point of view, if I'm going to make a change, which is the one that's going to matter? And I mean, there's a couple of issues to that. One would be, does it demonstrate business value to my execs? Because remember, I'm operating at an executive level. Is it going to sort one of their issues out? And what you could be saying is, if you've got this issue, what is important? What do we need to measure to demonstrate to you that we are moving forward on this issue? And that's when you start to get your metric, and that's when you start to get your change, or that one change that's going to matter.
So should you define that upfront, or is it probably something that you will define along within the so-called 21 days?
What I've seen with the CDOs is that after a period of time where they've done and they've had the ability to talk and discuss and understand what's going on, they tend to put down what's referred to as an urgent data strategy, something that they need to deal with right now, and they need to make a change within that period of time. And then they start, whilst they're doing that, they start to plan their intermediate and target data strategies. So they creep up onto that data strategy thing, and they don't do it all in one shot. But urgent is typically, I'm going to fix the headaches, I'm going to take the medicine that I need to take, and I'm going to start to apply appropriate ways of dealing with this issue. And if you can, and this is a really nice time to bring in the advanced analytics, because if you got the right data and you're getting to the right level and you can do the appropriate predictions, I think you'll blow them away in terms of what's possible with data.
No, that makes sense, definitely.
Yeah, Howard, I think it looks like we're good to go.
Okay.
It's been a great one. Thanks so much. I've enjoyed it. I've learned a lot.